we usually don't see, too many athletes hit competitions once the open starts. Usually Wadapalooza is the last thing. What and kind of the whole topic of Crescendo was, how beneficial is it for these teams to kind of do an in-person competition as they're preparing for semifinals?
I mean, think about how long it is from quarterfinals to semifinals. I mean, it's forever,
Yeah.
competitively speaking. And then, like in a team event, you can, as an athlete in a team event, you can get away with doing, like, I would say probably 2 or 3 competitions, maybe 2 competitions between now and semifinals, right? Or quarterfinals and semifinals. So I think it's great that people are competing in between. I wish more people would do it. I think that JR's opening a gate to people starting to think about this. I think next year we will see more teams go to Crash in preps. It's like I wanted to quote Adam Sandler from The Longest Yard, and I don't want to piss off any of the teams that were at Crash this weekend, but it's like if I'm going in, I know I'm a top dog. It's like, preseason you play Appalachian State and get your feels good, and then you go into a real game against Georgia or something. You know what I mean? You don't want to go in.
Appalachian State. is what he's saying.
App State's good now.
Yeah, I mean, but you think about the Open, right? For the teams, it's individual performances. Even the scores that maybe advance you to quarterfinals, they may not even be the athletes that are on your team. And then you get to quarterfinals, and yes, there is teamwork in that. But for these a lot of the teams, it didn't really, just being fit athletes is probably good enough.
Yeah.
But semifinals, getting into that top 10, beyond, the absolute best, Provens, Invictus, teamwork's going to come down to it. And I think it was probably a smart move on the Move Fast, Lift Heavy teams to make it down there.
Yeah.
How were the workouts, John, from a coordination standpoint? How kind of different were those from, say, what you saw programmed for the team quarterfinals?
I think they were way more reminiscent of what we will see in semifinals. I think so. Like, for instance, there was one of the workouts was a relay of 64 heavy wall balls and 8 snatches, like a waterfall style.
Mm-hmm.
Like stuff like that. They don't program that type of stuff in quarterfinals. Like quarterfinals is more like, let's just see who's fit. And if you're fit, then you'll make it. A lot of teams got to semifinals. A lot of stuff has been written about that already as far as the percentages. But like the way there was a lot of worm stuff. There was a lot of pegboard stuff. Like there was a pegboard event. There's just more odd objects. Like it's a very wide variety of things. It's not just limited to your, I would say, open equipment, right? I think quarterfinals for all divisions is limited to in-gym equipment, right? Like that you would have in every single, really in your garage.
JR has wild stuff nobody else has too.
Where I would say a lot of his events was very reminiscent of, hey, we can play with everything. And I'm going to, there were 2 scored events. I know we'll talk about that later on, but there was an event where your time on like machines or doing burpees was a 50 scored event. And then your max worm lunges in distance was your other event. And they were both 50-point scores. So and I know we're about to talk about that I just think it was very more semifinal reminiscent. So when he says, I think it is a great tune-up for semifinals, I couldn't agree more. Because there was a lot of teamwork-oriented stuff. You can't just rely on your people being fitter than other people, and I don't think you can. I don't think you can train team. You can train team cohesion, but it's way different in a competition when you need to make adjustments on the fly. One person's hurting and they can't do it. What are we gonna do? Or synchronicity. You get a hard judge where everything has to be like to the letter, right? Like that stuff is trained in competition. And unless you're just the fittest people, right? You got the proven team, the mayhem team, unless you're just fitter than everybody. Like, I feel like having competition experience, being able to train adjustments on the fly is really beneficial before you hit the big show.
Agreed.
Did you watch much the co-ed teams compete, or were you kind of resting for yourself?
You broke up there. Can you repeat it?
Were you able to go kind of watch those top teams on the floor, or were you taking that time and rather not really paying attention?
I would say half of the events. I didn't watch all the heats, but like the top heat, I watched. I would say half of the events, not all the way through, but just to see what was going on, who was winning, who was tearing people up, and who wasn't. Just stuff like that.
Yeah. Did you see any communication issues or things where it's obvious that they had some work to do? Both of those move fast, lift heavy teams are new. Some have some athletes from last year, but for the most part, the second team all new.
Yeah, so they were all pretty good. They none of them were looking like they were struggling like a ton. All the communication was good. It was teams. I would say once you get back after the top 5, those were the teams that had trouble. Like, say somebody's got too much worm on their shoulder and they can't hold it, and like you get a bunch of no reps. I wasn't there for the clean and jerk worm reps, so like I know those reps could have been off, right? Like that's a big team oriented thing,
right?
So, and I didn't see that one, but the one that I saw where they were lunging with the worm, all the top dogs seemed to be right in line with each other. I mean, they were in line with each other. There was no miscommunication. It was just the best people were the best people, right? There wasn't their strategy was way better than the other team's strategy. It was just who's fitter.
Tyler, one of the athletes on the Grit House team did injure it sounds like his shoulder now. How do you, is there concern though about going to some competition like this that's, it is very high level, right? It's not some local competition. JR is programming, top of the line workouts. And their season could have been over. Luckily, it sounds like it's fairly minor, but is that a concern for some of these teams, that especially, the top end ones?
Sorry, I've been watching football movies. So have you seen the longest?
To give us another analogy?
Yeah, not the longest yard. Friday Night Lights. Booby Miles gets hurt like 2 or 3 games into the season, and it's like, yeah, these things can happen. If I'm a coach or if I'm on the team, I'm going to be real honest about like, hey, I'm feeling beat up. But you can't help injury, and like some injuries are just random. So it's like that might happen. Is it worth it for you to go or not? If I'm a team, I don't know. I'm not averse to gambling ever. So I would go. But maybe tell your team going in, like, let's go 80%. Like, let's just hit a clean run on everything, like get really grooved in. We don't really care how we do here. We want to do well. And if we're in a chance to win, like maybe push it in, but like just hit everything clean. Let's grease the groove. That's what
Which is what a tune-up is. You're not selling your soul every single workout. You're just trying to put a good hard effort in and work on your team cohesion.
Yep.
And honestly, if you're like, you could tear your bicep in any point of training. You're training for semifinals, right? You're going to do some intense freaking workouts. Like that could happen at any. Look at Ricky. I know he did it mountain biking, but he's not like, I wouldn't be afraid to do a competition because you're going to get hurt. That doesn't make any sense to me. I think people train harder than they do most competitions, because competitions, you could have a 2-minute workout and then you got a 5-hour rest.
And they're training harder right now because they're going into semifinals. They may not have planned on going to Crash super early. And so it's like maybe they didn't peak themselves or prep themselves to have this in this part of their training. I think in the future, as teams use this as an outlet to, sort of grease the groove, they'll plan for that in their training. Like, hey, we don't need to be as beat up going into this competition. Let's hit it good, feel good, come back home, recover, and then like hammer it again, and then go into semifinals.
Yeah. I think overall, I think this is a great addition to the season. I mean, hopefully we'll see more teams take advantage of that. Maybe there's something on the West Coast at some point. Somebody in Europe should probably consider hosting one of these things, because I think it would definitely be beneficial for these teams, especially the ones that are on the cusp of, in that probably 7th to 15th place range. They can definitely make some big improvements there.